dawn from snow on the ground in what appears to be maybe early spring. He was attacked by a nest, long as he talks about that, and then he calls out on the radio, which apparently lures nesters into his traps. So not only can they emit radio signals, but they can also detect them as well. As Tricky then calls out, he's listening specifically for the one who attacked him earlier as they make different noises. In fact, as it will be mentioned, some of these nesters can actually combine their own sounds with radio repeating messages from like a store to kind of superimpose themselves over it. So the alarm is triggered as one then steps on the front door mat, as Tricky then laughs about how it gets lit up outside, because some of the traps he set up got a little less rudimentary and more going on prior to everyone on the planet disappearing. If that's kind of, I think, the point. Anyways, so Tricky is talking directly to the camera as this appears to be taking place either just as everything went wrong or slightly before. Emotionally, Tricky is a withdrawn man. He appears to liken life itself to constantly having to be battled, as the world he lives in is likened to a monster. Every day he gets up, but some days he just hides away. He goes out to face it again and again, but every so often he must stay home, away from others, in order to lick his wounds. He has been told to seek help in the past, but seemingly either he has tried and it didn't work, or it has been a one step forward, two steps back sort of situation for him. Because of this, as time has gone on, he has become more and more kind of isolated. He views others as essentially always wanting something from him and not forming genuine connection. This seemingly indicates that prior to his forced isolation, he freely chose to begin this isolation to begin with, I guess. There appears to be evidence, given the phrasing he uses, of substance abuse in the past and some sort of difficulty with recovery that he has faced as a result, potentially leading to a feeling of being judged by others. This further compounded the issue of him hiding away from virtually everyone, including his own family. What this does seem to establish, however, outside of the events that follow, is that Tricky was attempting to escape reality in some capacity, but not facing it. So, consequences of this, whether intentional or not, appear to place him directly in what he seemingly wanted, which to a degree he appears to thrive in, though many others, this would likely not be the actual result. The actual result for well-established people would be probably talking to a volleyball until loneliness finally got you, that or a nest, whichever came first. Episode 7 kicks off, and what I think is actually a great idea. Look, if I'm the last man on Earth, why would I stay somewhere that gets cold and has inclement weather? For reference, hurricanes aren't inclement if I can get out of the way fast enough. I'm straight up jacking a yacht and going to an abandoned island, or maybe tracking whatever is near a gas port, because obviously if the supply lines are still there, why not? Anyhow, it starts with a bloody face. He headed south down the coast to look for more people. He's feeling cooped up as he talks to some cereal. The nesters are amassing outside anyway, so maybe time to leave this area for a little bit. He heads to the beach for a vacation. Packing up, he lock and loads Brides of Christ as he takes his N64 with him. Beginning his trek, this is like a multi-week walk. Why not take a car? Presumably gas stations and vehicles still work, correct? Again, it's just an allegory for homelessness. Talking, as he walks through the woods, he listens on the radios for nesters as he continues to find carvings in the trees as well. Grabbing some food at the store, he heads to the Guitar Center next and plays some guitars before finally taking one, and then makes it to the coast, which is totally abandoned. Again, I don't have any idea how he was able to accomplish this. Heading to a fancy hotel, he looks through the pictures as then he enters one of the rooms and locks the door. Setting up his N64, he plays it and eats candy. Laying down, he goes to bed as the next day he makes himself some food and eats in bed, talking about what he intends to do for the day. Walking around the coastal city again, nobody is there, like at all. It's actually pretty crazy. Some nesters are in the area though, one wearing a suit, and then running away he moves to a new location and then heads to another candy store. He talks to his non-existent audience some more before seeing a nester standing in the wind, as then he heads under the pier and then to the movie theater. Entering the theater, he watches the movie as night begins to fall with the sun setting in the south, which I don't think it's supposed to be that way. The sun sets obviously in the west, and in the winter it's going to set more in the southwest, but this is like dead down the coast. And if the coast runs north to south, which it does, it's setting there, I don't think is how it should be. I mean, I think this is Jersey. I haven't been on the coast of Jersey during a sunset, but this to me is a bit strange. I could be making a big deal out of nothing, but that is something that continues to add to the strangest, at least in my mind, to the entire event. So waking up that night, you know what, before waking up that night, if you're in Jersey and clearly it's spring, maybe even winter or like late winter, let me know if that's where the sun sunsets over there. 'Cause I'm used to the beaches down here in the south, and it's like always behind me setting. Anyways, he can hear a noise out on the coast, and waking up, he finds a speaker where the wire is actually running into the ocean itself. That's also a bit odd. As a Nestor then approaches him, finding his N64 controller out of his room, he brandishes man's answer to the Nestor menace as he searches said room. His camera starts shutting off as he's attacked, and he's forced to use the N64 to take out the Nestor that was attacking him, breaking it in the process. The Nestors have red blood, which is rather interesting, and then heading out to the sand, he buries the N64 the next morning and puts a conclusion on his vacation. Moving into the most current episode, episode 8, he's the last person on Earth, probably the last animal on Earth, and there is something outside. He starts this whole thing off with being in a graveyard, as he makes wants to make creamy coconut lime soup. It's definitely spring or early summer at this point, and he needs a new mode of transportation. Moving through the graveyard, particularly Nestor's there, and grabbing all the stuff he needs, we move back into cooking with Tricky once more, which is quite extensive. Sitting down, he then talks to us some more as it flashes through different spots. He wants to get a bike and put mirrors on it to, confuse the Nestors and have a force multiplier in case they get too close. Along with that, he wants something that he can then drop that will emit sound and confuse them. Jumping down into the basement that night, he stays down there when he feels like something is up. He has concocted a radio antenna that is directed rather than just, a radius, so he can actually hear what direction they are coming from. Attaching it to an RC car, he begins his trek through his yard and listening to one. It is at a store, and it's actually talking over an ad. It has combined radio signals with it, which is interesting in and of itself. As he notes this, he listens for more, specifically the one in the hospital gown. As he writes down in his log what he is hearing, he wants to understand the sounds they emit so he can see who is dangerous and who is not. As he does this, one can be seen on screen saying hello and waving to him. He says to be wary of that. Some of them are in the mid-stage. They will actually talk using words to lure you out. It looks like it has a difficult time controlling its body as it spasmodically moves and talks, which I want you to pay particular attention to the hands. This actually denotes there could be an issue with the brain itself. Anyways, turning off the light, he then goes to bed for the night, and thus concludes for the time being the Glendale Files. Hello, welcome to the wild speculation portion. The reality is, we know very little about these creatures and what their purpose actually is, except I completely know, so you should definitely stick around because I figured it out halfway through writing this. But we also don't really know how they got here or by what. Because of this issue, the only thing that we can actually do is look at the Nestors for what they are. They appear reclusive and violent. They will attack Tricky, but weirdly enough, despite being attacked several times and existing out in the open environment with these creatures all around him, there never really seems to be a successful attack. Well, kind of successful. Like, you'd think at a certain point that the Nestors were actually trying to take him out, then why does the one on the beach just stand there? Why does the one in the hospital gown follow and rip his shirt, but does nothing else? Why does Mr. Whiteout approach and then leave Tricky alone? These questions raise many points about these creatures, I guess, that I find, and probably you as well, pretty bizarre. But I think I do have some theories, as I always would, on potentially how this would take place. And to understand that, we need to adopt the idea that the devil is in the details. This requires us to ask ourselves quite a few questions, which I believe will actually help to make sense of what the Nestors are. So the first question is, was this actually an apocalypse? The question, I believe, is kind of one of the more important ones to ask, because when we look at the environment, there's no lead up, and the consequences are seemingly gone, as well as, was there even one in the first place? So let's imagine for a moment there was some sort of illness or sickness that took hold on this world. If this was the case, then where are all, the burned out cars? Surely someone would have converted into a Nestor somewhere while driving, right? Or the stores in general are a huge clue, and that all of this is pretty much instant. If there was some sort of situation where people are slowly becoming Nestors, believe it or not, actually World War Z is a good example of this. Of course, it could just be New Jersey in general, but stores would be absolutely inundated with people gather supplies. In an effort to do so, they would not be careful about what they took or how they took it. Yet, when Tricky enters any store whatsoever, the shelves are neat and orderly, and there is nothing actually in place. As he moves from place to place looking for shelter, he knows that many kind of areas that he's searching concerning the city, you would think that a place was empty, but a Nestor would be in there, hiding and watching you. After all the locations he has gone through and attempts to seek shelter in, still, he runs into absolutely no human. Later, when he enters the mountain home, still nobody on the outskirts of cities or even in the deep wilderness seeking refuge from some event that was taking place. Everything, everywhere, no matter where he moves to or from, like humans, possibly, when realistically what we are seeing is maybe an adjacent human Earth. But we're gonna kind of talk about this heavily here in a few, so like I said, I think I figured it out. So the second question that will explain what happened here is where are all the animals? As Tricky makes his way through the environment, I don't know about you, but I actually never see a single animal. There are no farm animals, there are no birds in the trees. Even in summer, as far as I can hear, you can't even hear insects in the graveyard through the grass as he walked through to go to the store. The world is completely silent except for the screaming of nesters if you want to listen to them over the radio for some reason. Of course, as they progress, eventually they can start talking to you, making them appear more human, which will also kind of get to the more biological portion of this video. But for now, we can surmise pretty clearly that the world is devoid of life apart from Plant, Nestor, and Tricky. The next question we have to ask is if the animals are gone, where is the freaking meat coming from? The shelves are stocked. Tricky's able to make a chicken parm extensively, like I thought I was actually being pranked by my subscribers who suggested I watch this. And at this point in the timeline, it has been weeks. If the meat were still out in the fridge area, it doesn't matter if the power grid was still going, the meat would 100% be rotting by now. Slowly, but rotting. This means the meat has to be refreshed along with everything else on the shelves. Everything is very clearly being supplied to the stores. The power grid is still running. Society itself has all of its basic functions that Tricky would find comfortable enough. However, unless there is a Nestor Union out there diligently working for one reason or another, this should not be the case. Entropy is not a suggestion, it is a law. As things run unattended, they will fall apart over time. Humanity is hilarious because realistically, we are always at odds with this universal fact. We are the only creature, as far as we can tell in our immediate vicinity, that resists the law of entropy to the scale that we do. Without us, nature does take over. Power grids would fail within weeks as the systems in place would run unchecked, and without maintenance, this is just the standard. Trees would fall on lines, pipes would burst due to the cold of winter, food would rot on shelves, and yet we see none of that taking place. Something, somehow, is repairing and restocking the world from unseen resources, which brings up the next question. Why Tricky? Well, given the realities of the world he finds himself in, from our understanding of entropy and the fact that as a species we have to put in energy to prevent chaos from moving into everything else, then we can attribute something is putting energy into this system. For what reason? Well, to put it bluntly, I believe it's for Tricky. This entire place is not the result of an apocalypse or some sort of just catastrophic event, but really, it's a kind of cage if you think about it. In this cage, we'll begin to institutionalize Tricky over time, so to speak. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look at the nesters, and then we can compare it to Tricky's own behavior over time, because I also believe there is an endpoint here. And when we look at some of the most clear examples of the nesters, that being the patient scene, and the one watching Tricky in his monologues near the lake, and also the one that waves at the camera, we see potential changes to a human brain, believe it or not. So let's start with their physical appearance. Before we gotta start, as per usual, starting with the feet because that's how this channel is, they are regular human feet. Not a dry eye in the house over this revelation. Their body is perfectly human for the most part, sporting no real differences from a regular person. This bipedalism is actually something that is not really that common for a primate. While some primates can momentarily walk upright, the structure of their legs are fundamentally different. The Achilles tendon does not store the energy like it would in a human. The legs are not angled more inward to allow for continual support and to be used as the primary limbs for locomotion. The shape of the feet themselves come from running after prey over long distances, and while having lost their dexterity for the most part, they now have become a solid surface in which the body can actually maintain posture and support, as well as transfer energy for the next step. When we look at a nestor, it is the exact same. If we take an evolutionary approach to these creatures, mimicry would not be enough to explain away what we are seeing. Mimicry is the process in which animals will mimic other animals, usually for protection purposes to ward off predators or things that they don't want near them. But to look at a nestor, the reality of the morphology indicates that these are specific and evolved traits over a long period of time. However, the question again is why? Well, let's assume for a moment, moving back into their morphology, that they did in fact evolve to have true bipedalism and their legs operate in a way that is supposed to maximize energy in order to hunt. What exactly are they hunting? There are no other animals here, so to speak of, so there is nothing to chase down or really eat. So then, what could they be used for? As we continue looking at the nestor, the most clear horrifying thing is obviously going to be their face. They will hold the hands, or their hands to their ears and appear to be in a screaming position. You know what? It actually kind of, what is that painting? The Scream, I think it's called, where you got like the FBI agents in the back and the person screaming. That's kind of what they look like. Anyways, the mouth will be open and they will also appear to be completely bald. This episode is sponsored by Keeps. That's not because, like, anything in particular, but it is something that does stand out. Their eyes are also something worth paying attention to, specifically with the hospital gown Nestor. The eyes actually reflect a yellow coloring, just for a moment, and then the camera pans away. And this would seem to imply the existence of what is known as a tapetum lucidum, and this is the reflective portion that sits behind the retina in the eyes of some animals such as canines and felines. Its purpose is to reflect light through the retina once more because they're nocturnal animals, to give them a second chance at capturing any light they may have missed. And this will also reflect light through the pupil if you look at it at a certain angle. The nesters then appear also to have this, which further explains their movements as well. Tricky notes the nesters have several different behaviors, but what's interesting is he will begin to display these as well. Voice crack aside, the nesters, while moving from place to place, begin to have their world kind of shrink to smaller and smaller areas. Not literally, but they move from what you would assumedly be like moving around outside, to moving just within a house, to moving into a basement or closet, not knowing if they could actually open back up, or if they would open up, maybe their world would begin to expand once again. Such is the fate as many a Reddit mod. These guys suck. Anyways, the nesters also display other behaviors, though no timeline of seeming progression is attributed to those, though other traits will. The nesters, when moving into specific areas, will find more enclosed areas because they likely feel safer. They will begin painting on the walls with something, and then we don't know what the something is, and they never really leave behind their sleeping bags or pillows. They will become aggressive if you invade their space also, and they seemingly only like to move at around the times of 12 p.m., as made mention by Tricky, saying he likes the idea of being inside making lunch around that time, or possibly around 5:30, which I believe is actually 5:30 in the morning, but he doesn't really specify. And given the actual level of nesters out at night, this would make sense as to why this is the case. Again, the aforementioned tapetum lucidum. Now, by Tricky's reckoning, there is in fact a progression point concerning level of potential aggression. While some nesters will actually not openly attack, some will. And given the spasmodic events of their body, there appears to be issues with their brains. Which, do not worry your pretty striped head, we will get there. But there is the early stages of Nestor, which I believe here is, well, there's actually an earlier stage than this, but there's the mid stage where they appear to be more aggressive, and then there's a late stage where the Nestor can then begin to talk to other humans, luring them out by Tricky's words. So let's pause that for a moment, as we have to ask ourselves, why human language? Sometimes when the nesters scream on the radio waves, they appear to create somewhat vague human noises. They also appear to somehow emit radio waves. But do they really? Cue the Vsauce noise here. So I think I've kind of beat around the bush long enough. I think I know what these things are, and I think I know why they are here. This isn't just a case of Tricky having some sort of mental breakdown like I've seen.
Hmm. Okay, I can make that. Need the board and the campfire. 24 brick. Oh, bricks. To make the bricks block. Campfire, and then 3 ingots. Okay.
Videos saying, or maybe he's just seeing the world in an isolated way. I think Tricky is literally in an alternate dimension with these things, and we are seeing in real time this happen to Tricky. First off, the Nesters are human. For the universe to not fall to entropy and everything to continue running, something has placed Tricky here intentionally. He was plucked out of existence by, let's just imagine, like the Solitude deity. He gathers up those who truly want to be left alone and then gives them exactly what they want in basically what he has as a pocket dimension. This pocket deity will then interact
2016,
somewhat,
not 24.
like what Mr. Whiteout actually is, given he's just phasing through reality. It makes appearances over time to check on its new toys, but it keeps its distance. The Nesters themselves are essentially humans who have been there longer. They were people who felt exactly like Tricky did. I mean, even if you look at Tricky, he doesn't appear to really be spiraling at all that badly at first, which I definitely would. And given his isolation from humanity, which again, this is just how he lived his life in the first place, he's doing quite well. But brother, the consequences, they are a-comin'. Those who have been here longer, as it's claimed, are simply those who follow the natural progression of devolving in this place. You can look at the influence of this pocket dimension on humans, much like gravity working in the universe. There is an all-encompassing, ever-present force that continues to act on every human place in this environment. And this also might explain the formation of the tapetum lucidum and all the other sort of morphological changes that would then begin to take place. But this force is insidious at first, but eventually you display the same predictable behaviors and morphological changes over time. For instance, how did Tricky figure out the Nesters emit radio waves? I mean, he likely didn't inherently know. He picked up a radio and called out before finding that the Nesters are doing the same thing. Probably a pretty normal thing to do, honestly, if you're trying to find out if there's others. Later, he gets on a radio and continues calling out to actually lead them into traps. Fundamentally, Tricky is doing the same thing, nothing different than what the Nesters are doing. They aren't emitting radio waves. They have their own radios that they use, and we're trying to do the same thing before they progressed into what they are, which is very likely going to just be a leftover trait from when they were more human. And then they've done this so long that it just becomes ingrained into their behaviors, even as they devolve. The pillow and sleeping bag are also a massive tell. While pretty good for a pick up and go method, what about if you stay in one place? I don't know about you, I've slept on the floor in a sleeping bag. It's not comfortable. Your hip hurts. Tricky has been living in his childhood home for months now, and yet he still sleeps in the sleeping bag and has his pillow, literally noting earlier that a nester never leaves these behind. Clearly, neither does Tricky. And I think the most clear example that humans become nesters the more time that is spent there is in the final episode. As Tricky sits in the basement, he begins to tell everyone that it just feels safer in here and how he really likes being down there because there's a deadbolt and then nothing can get in. He decides to go to bed, and if you look at his eyes, you can kind of see that they're changing somehow. Now, it could just be the lighting, but that's not the main point. The main point is that Tricky is displaying behavior increasingly similar to the Nesters themselves. He has further isolated to the basement, which is exactly what the Nesters do, and he keeps his sleeping bag and pillow with him always, which is what the Nesters do, and he talks on the radio to them and uses it, which is what the Nesters do. Bro is straight up changing into a Nester. He just does not realize it yet. So I propose there is a early, mid, and late stage that exists, the pre-stage. This is a human who has recently ended up in this dimension. They were picked specifically because of their behaviors in the regular world and then dropped into this one, getting presumably exactly what they want. However, too much of a good thing sort of scenario. As Tricky continues on with his regular lifespan, he begins to show more and more traits leaning towards becoming a Nester himself. But what sort of impacts would this have? Well, those who are in the pre-stage are human. They are Tricky. They are like they had some proclivity earlier in life and have just arrived completely confused as to what they are here for or why these things are around them. Their world has changed because their universe has changed. They will be completely normal apart from desiring more alone time than usual, which is what Tricky did in his normal human life. If you ran into this person, they may seem a bit off or non-friendly, but there would really be nothing else really to note about them. The early stage is when changes begin to kind of creep in. The person is human and they would believe that they're just surviving in this world, but behaviors begin to arise due to the isolation they face or what they would believe is related to that. See, social interaction has a stabilizing effect on humans, and without it, our brains can actually start to form some pretty bizarre patterns and behaviors, almost compulsive and obsessive, actually. Paranoia is known to form. So, actually, back in college, this is how quickly it can happen if you're like a high social person, which I'm a high social person. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. Tricky would probably outlast me. But basically, it was Thanksgiving break, and I chose to stay at school for a little while longer. There was nobody in the dorm except for me. I was living on the bottom floor, which actually was the underground portion. I know, I was becoming a nester. I was in the basement. Anyways, so after about 4 or 5 days of